Hello everybody, welcome to StraightA, Dawson here, back with another video with our 2023-2024 playoffs kind of conversations here. Today, we'll be saying who will benefit the most from a Super Bowl victory today. I've seen a list recently online, and I kind of disagreed with it, so we're going to give my hot takes on this today. Before we get started though, leave a like down below, leave a comment down below of any suggestions you have for this video or for videos in the future for this channel, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And we're going to get right into the teams that benefit the least to benefit the most to a Super Bowl win this year. Of course, this is made right before the divisional round starts, so we still have 8 teams in the playoffs before all the divisional round matchups go ahead. But I'm kind of taking this from multiple different standpoints, not just the QB, not just necessarily the head coach, not necessarily just the franchise, not necessarily just individual players. I'm taking it kind of from every angle I can, and anything kind of thought of, put my thoughts on the thing. And while I do think there's multiple reasons, obviously any franchise will benefit hugely from a Super Bowl. Some teams benefit more than others, and I put the reasons why they would benefit the most on the actual PowerPoint and then rank them from there. Some will have a lot more than others, and some will have a few more than others, or a few less than others. So kind of take that with a grain of salt. If there's anything I missed that you believe that should be noted, please leave it in the comments below, and I'll say whether my opinion kind of changes with that viewpoint. I looked at pretty much those 4 categories of QB, head coach, franchise, and individual players on the team, but I kind of just weighed them all and just said, all right, this is the list. And it may be controversial, especially when we get to the top of the list, but either way, let's get right into the video. At number 8, and I feel like this is the least controversial opinion of this whole divisional round or this whole list, is the Kansas City Chiefs are probably the team that will benefit the least from a Super Bowl victory. Purely because they have had so much recent success, and just because of the amount of status that team already has. Andy Reid's already very successful. Patrick Mahomes is already one of the best QBs. They already have a lot of the older members of the roster already have their big rings, and they still have a lot of younger members who still have a long time with the team. That way, Kansas City is still put together. They still have many more years they're going to be in the conversation. So Kansas City really doesn't need this win. Obviously, they will still benefit greatly. For one, it proves that the Chiefs didn't really fall off. We just kind of harshly judged them because they're the top team. No matter the season, Chiefs will always show up in the playoffs. That's what they can solidify. I'd say the Dolphins game is not really showing that. It's more so just showing that they're not a bad team, which I don't think anybody really thought of. I mean, they had the clear advantage with the weather that game. Either way, Travis Kelce is nearing the end of his career, one way or the other, and another Super Bowl victory kind of maybe give an opportunity to send him on his way. Maybe not, who knows? But kind of capstoning that whole career. Patrick Mahomes solidifying his top QB status. I think he already pretty much has, but I mean, this really would solidify him. 3 Super Bowls before the age of 30 is super impressive. And of course, back-to-back Super Bowls and 4 Super Bowls for this franchise. Pretty much, when you're at 3, you're in a pretty good club, because 1 and 2, there's a lot of franchises with 1 or 2 Super Bowl victories. 3 is a nice little class to be in, but now you're getting 4 and above, where you're getting to a nice little class, and of course 6 and above will now be on your own pedestal, because the Steelers and Patriots are the only ones at that level. But either way, the Chiefs will be solidifying that for the franchise for history. Either way, even though there's a lot on here, I don't believe any of these really stack up. It's kind of just they're proving themselves even more. No one will blame them if they lose in the playoffs right here. No, everybody's going to still say Patrick Mahomes is one of the best. Everybody's still going to say Kansas City is still one of the best teams going into next season. Probably still have high betting odds to win the Super Bowl next year. No matter what, Kansas City is going to be in the conversation next year for the next couple of years if nothing drastic happens. So they're at number 8 just because there's a lot of other franchises and a lot of other teams that would benefit greatly from a Super Bowl victory. And number 7 are the Green Bay Packers. Probably one of my more controversial opinions here for the playoffs this year. Purely because I couldn't think of many reasons for them to win the Super Bowl. I think the reasons they do have are really big and would automatically kind of take them above the Chiefs, even though I debated about putting the Green Bay Packers in 8th, just because their franchise has a lot of good things. I only put the good things, the reasons they should, on the list, but they have a very valuable franchise already. They have really nothing to prove. They're got the Steelers. They're always going to be in the conversation of winning a Super Bowl, or even at least making the playoffs. They're always going to have a good roster and good kind of minds behind the scenes. They've had good QBs going from Favre to Rodgers, now to Love. I mean, that's the one thing you can kind of take from this, is that they win a Super Bowl right now. They went from Favre to Rodgers to Love, and in this new third QB to Love, he ties the QB, the amount of Super Bowls they've won from Favre and Rodgers. Favre only won 1, and Rodgers only won 1. Love will then automatically, in his first year starting, take him to Super Bowl and win, automatically already tying the other two, showing crap, if those two are like, Hall of Fame QBs, and Love did it in his first year, what will this franchise become? But that reason only can carry them so far. Jordan Love, of course, had a lot of criticisms going into this year because it's like, is Jordan Love actually the guy for Green Bay? Is he actually the next Rodgers? Which obviously is unfair to compare him to a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback. But either way, he's been playing pretty dang well and could lift this franchise to a whole new level. And I just think that the franchise in general just doesn't gain much outside of Jordan Love. There's no other player on that team that I think would benefit greatly. Jair Alexander, sure. Aaron Jones, yes, sure. There's just nobody that pops out saying they need this Super Bowl, in my opinion. Matt LaFleur, I don't really have much opinions on him for that regard. And that's why I didn't put him on here. But if you want to add him to the conversation, sure. But you can pretty much add any head coach in that conversation. So I didn't have any distinct reason to show, Matt LaFleur needs to win a Super Bowl. Either way, number 7 is with the Green Bay Packers. That's where we'll stand. At number 6, and obviously I think 6 and above at this point, I think or maybe 6 into like 4. 6 to 4 are really, really close to me. Just because they have really good varying reasons why winning a Super Bowl will be so important for them. The Houston Texans are one of the hardest teams to rank because they are the youngest franchise in the NFL currently. They have a rookie head coach. They have a rookie quarterback. And there's no promises that a team like this is going to be in the playoffs next year or even the Super Bowl conversation next year. Just because, like we saw what happened to the Jaguars. Jaguars had such a great season last year. They were in the conversation this year. They all of a sudden plummeted down. Obviously, I'm not comparing C.J. Stroud and D'Amico Ryans to the Jacksonville Jaguars at all. But there's no promises that this team will continue this momentum. I think they will. I think this team's good enough to do that. But there's no promises of that. They haven't solidified anything. So it's like I feel like they need to win now. Otherwise, they might have closed the door for them. But they still have a very young roster. They have a rookie head coach, a rookie quarterback. The fact they made it this far, at this point, they're kind of playing with house money. This is similar to the Green Bay Packers, which I really didn't mention. The Packers really didn't expect to make the playoffs, and now they're playing with house money. I think a lot of these teams are entering the playoffs playing with house money, and they have nothing to lose. And I think the Texans are kind of like that. Less so because I think that with how young their franchise is, winning a Super Bowl ring before like many other teams, like 11 other teams, I think, that would be so important for the franchise, just showing that they have been criticized last like 20 plus years because they have not been very good many years. I don't think they've made it to a conference championship before. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars have, but I don't think the Houston Texans have. And so making it purely to that point, and then possibly even to the Super Bowl before teams like the Browns, the Lions, or stuff, teams like that, they benefit so much just by lifting the franchise up and showing, hey, we're a young franchise, but we finally made it to this caliber. But they also have this the young roster with so much future potential would help start a dynasty. It also kind of works both ways if they don't necessarily need to win this year. There's nothing that they're really going to lose from not winning it this year. If anything, everybody's going to look at it like, man, the fact you made it to the divisional, or the fact that you made it to the conference is so important for them. And they just have a bright future ahead. That's kind of why I'm putting them at 6, but I can see some conversations being meant for the Houston Texans probably being more important for them to win at 5 or 4 spot. Probably not top 3, but I think 6 spot's still pretty nice for them. So Houston Texans will sit at 6. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at number 5. When I was looking at this, I was not thinking I was going to put them in 5 spot or above, or 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I was really thinking they'd probably be more in the 6, 7 range. But when I really started breaking it down, the only thing that was really holding it back for me was the fact that they have won it very recently with Tom Brady 3 years ago, because it was Chiefs, Rams, Bucks. Yeah, Chiefs, Rams, Bucks. So like 3 years ago. So the franchise itself doesn't really benefit a whole lot. I think they have 2 Super Bowl wins. There's not like a whole lot there. And, moving on from Tom Brady, of course, everybody kind of wrote them off. And that's another big reason is that, Browns gave up on Baker. Panthers moved on from Baker. Rams moved on from Baker. And the Bucks gave him the shot. And he's not playing. He's obviously not going to be Tom Brady, but he is playing very, very well and leading a team that was thought to be wrote off to not only they make it to the playoffs, but they actually moved on to the divisional with a nice, favorable matchup. Both the Lions and the Bucks have a very real shot of winning their game, and one of them is going to make it to the conference championship, and both teams are wrote off. And I think Baker carries us a lot, but also Todd Bowles has low-key been really criticized as his head coach, and you can't deny facts. If he does as well as he does, even if he makes it to the conference, even if actually as far as he made it now, he solidified a nice little job for himself because of how well this team has done in the last couple of years, even now without Tom Brady. So it's hard to say, hey, yeah, Tom Bowles, get out of here. And the only other big reason I'd say is that there's a lot of aging players on that team. And while a lot of us thought the Bucs would be wrote off for this season, including myself, because of their aging roster, they showed that they might still have, another year or two, but they don't have a whole lot longer if they don't find those younger cornerstone pieces. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans are getting older. Their defensive backs are getting a little bit older. The defensive line has a couple old pieces on there. And, Baker, while I think he's good, he's not necessarily a young buck either. He's still fairly young, though. So, and is he going to be their guy? There's a lot of questions still left for the Bucs here. And, of course, I think that there's a lot of gain they can gain from, a lot of benefit they can gain from winning, obviously, but I think there's teams that deserve it a little bit more. I think not deserve it, but have more to gain from it. And I think the Buccaneers still sit a nice little in the middle just because of their aging roster and the criticisms from the top brass to Todd Bowles and Baker. So this is really would solidify them to be a really good franchise for the next couple of years, or at least be really proven for themselves, at least for the next couple of years. But I think they've already kind of proven that by making it this far, and making it the conference would be even better. Winning the Super Bowl would be extraordinary. Either way, I'm going to keep the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 5. At number 4 are the San Francisco 49ers, and I didn't have a hard time putting these guys here at 4. I feel like they fit nicely at 4. I think that they will gain a lot more than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Houston Texans, but I think still are a caliber to in terms of benefit from the first 3. And there's a couple reasons for that. For one, the San Francisco 49ers are a very prestigious franchise. They already have a lot. They've proven a lot. They don't need to be in the conversation every year. It's kind of similar to Chiefs, but they have not seen much recent success, I guess. They made it to the Super Bowl a couple years ago, lost to the Chiefs, but they don't have a whole lot to prove as a franchise. Now, why they sit nicely at 4 is because of the players behind them. For one, they have been built like a superstar-making team for the last 2 years. If they don't win the Super Bowl in a very near time, whether it was to this year or next year and the year after, they're going to start losing that gap's going to start closing on them. They still have very young players with very, very big talent, but they don't have forever. And so if we're going to build them up as one of these great teams, they have to win a Super Bowl eventually. And if they don't, that's going to be really not great for the players on this team as well as Kyle Shanahan. Mr. Irrelevant, of course, this would be, I think, the first ever time a starting QB for one, Mr. Irrelevant winning the Super Bowl. I think this is the first time a starting Mr. Irrelevant player wins the Super Bowl at all. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments if I'm forgetting anybody, but I'm sure Mr. Irrelevants have won Super Bowls by being on backups or whatever, but I'm talking about starting caliber players. Either way, that would be super important. Brock Purdy, so young in his career, getting a Super Bowl would be really important for him. It's a monster team built. Winning Super Bowl it's now time to win it. They've obviously invested in CMC last year. They are investing in Chase. They invested in Chase Young. They're going to probably invest more in this offseason if they don't win it. Plus, Kyle Shanahan's 0-2 in the Super Bowl. He needs his redemption. He needs to actually show that he's a head coach that can win the Super Bowl, that he can win in big-time plays, that he's not just going to give up in the divisional or conference or even the Super Bowl itself. And they kind of need to prove that. There's a lot of these players have a lot to prove, and not all of them are very young. They still have their prime. Next 2 or 3 years, they still are going to be very prime players. But then 4, 5, 6 years now, you're going to start seeing a couple of them maybe drop off. CMC is going to get up into the running back deterioration age. You're going to see the defensive lines go from about the 27-ish range to about the 30s. It's going to get a little bit older. Their tight end, George Kittle's not a young buck. Brandon Ayuk, I guess, is fairly young. Debo's, I think, still fairly young. Brock Purdy's still fairly young, so they still have a couple younger pieces, but they're not just playing with house money anymore. They're kind of playing for like keeps at this point, and not all the time do you get the number 1 seed, so you have to utilize that while you have it. And of course, many players are suffering from so close so far. Fred Warner's a good example of he made it to Super Bowl, just never won the big one. So they need to do it now. They need to do it soon. But I still think there's a couple other teams and franchises still in the playoffs that still benefit a whole lot more. But San Francisco, certainly of the 5 through 8 teams, are certainly the head of the pack here. But 1 through 3, I think, are a whole new caliber. Talking about whole new caliber, the other number 1 seed in the playoffs, the Baltimore Ravens. I think that, I'm going to just flat out say it, Lamar Jackson carries the reason for the number 3 spot here. And I really thought about it because I saw something, and one of the main things I saw was about Lamar Jackson always kind of being left out of the conversation of QBs. Think about it. If you talk about good QBs, I don't really ever hear anybody talk about Lamar Jackson. I hear Patrick Mahomes, obviously. I hear Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts last year. Tua was in that conversation even a little bit. Jalen Hurts, if I didn't say him. Brock Purdy now. Dak Prescott's being added to that conversation. And Lamar Jackson finally kind of is, thanks to his MVP caliber season. But even now, people are saying, of course, he's going to be the QB that probably wins it. But people are going to criticize him because he doesn't deserve it or something, because CMC deserves it more or something. So Lamar Jackson's constantly being battered down of he's not the QB. And I had a conversation with somebody and saying, would the Ravens be the caliber team they are without Lamar Jackson? And even if you put like a similar style player like Kyler Murray somewhere in Baltimore, would they be the Baltimore Ravens? And with how tough their division is, I don't know if the Baltimore Ravens would be in the playoffs without Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson needs this so much. Lamar Jackson needs this a lot. And he would finally solidify himself as a top QB, someone to prove himself. And that, these scrambling quarterbacks, I have a big stigma against scrambling quarterbacks, because I think they only have basically till they're 30, basically kind of running back age, until they're not good anymore because they can't move as much. But Lamar Jackson's proven me more and more wrong, because he's getting up more and more in age. He's still fairly young, but he's still playing like MVP caliber level. And so I'm kind of getting iffy there. They have a lot of aging players. Of course, I would love to get a Super Bowl. Odell Beckham's playing with house money at this point. I don't think he expected to get this far. A couple of younger players would love to do it. And really, this year, they've been battered and torn. And winning the Super Bowl would show, man, this franchise and this team is resilient as fuck. John Harbaugh will become a 2-time Super Bowl winner in 16 years. He's like 61 years old. He's not young. He doesn't have a whole lot longer as playing as a head coach. I'm sure of course he can go another 10 years. But when you get up to that age, you don't necessarily want to keep on doing that for 25 plus years. I'm sure maybe he will. I'm not going to speak on any of that. I'm sure he's still got a couple more years of prime definitely doing this. But he's not young buck anymore. I've said that a lot lately. But this would solidify him as one of the greatest head coaches, so, bar none. 3-time Super Bowl head coach is a very, very big accomplishment, and he's I think 2-0 in the Super Bowl too. So making it to the Super Bowl and winning it makes him 3-0. Not many people can say they're 3-0 in a Super Bowl. And of course, it's a young franchise because it's only since 1996, I believe, that this franchise has been in existence, which I really didn't realize. We talked about the Texans being winning a Super Bowl in for their little over 20 years as a franchise. The Baltimore Ravens aren't much older, and they're less than 30 years old, and they're going to possibly have 3 Super Bowls, which basically equates to 1 Super Bowl every 10 years, which is insane. Like, if you can call it kind of an accomplishment if you make it every 32 years, or win a Super Bowl every 32 years, which many teams haven't. So, like, the fact that you could win one every 10 years is absolutely insane to me. And I think that, again, there's a lot of good reasons behind Lamar Jackson to lift him up into that 3 spot, but Lamar Jackson kind of carries them up to that final echelon of they are a top 3 team that not necessarily deserves, but that would really benefit from winning the Super Bowl and finally being in that conversation. So, Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson are sitting at number 3. At number 2 are the Detroit Lions. And of course, that means a lot of people already know what the number 1 spot is. I'm going to try to avoid saying the name just for posterity's sake, in case you don't know who the other team already is. But I super debated between 1 and 2. Because for very different reasons, both of these franchises need this Super Bowl win. And especially with their current state. The reason the Detroit Lions, let's give the reasons why they deserve to be number 2 for 1. They are a very old franchise. They have never reached a Super Bowl, much less win one. Dan Campbell was immediately wrote off after his first press conference. Of course, that's going around recently a lot about the kneecaps, biting your kneecaps off, spitting it out, bringing it back down, and how a lot of people criticize him on that. And plus, he wasn't the typical head coach. A lot of people criticize his coaching methods and all that. So people are writing him off as maybe not the head coach to do it. The team's behind QB that's never thought to be able to win the big one. Derek Goff, of course, has failed once already. Can he really accomplish it again? Can he be the guy that takes him all the way? And he's being wrote off a lot. And finally, this is his way of saying, already with the Rams win, he's showing, hey, I can do this. But can he really? Is really the conversation we're having here. And yeah, it's a young team that could possibly do this. But as we said with the Houston Texans, this isn't a team that has proven that they have written franchise potential, as in they're going to be here next year. They have a tough division. The Bears are only getting better. The Packers are really good. The Vikings, you can never write them off totally. The Lions don't have every year to be able to be in the position they are, especially with favorable positions. With the Packers being upsetting the Cowboys, they don't have to face a big caliber team. They're facing the Bucs, who also upset the Eagles. So the Lions are put in a very favorable position where I think I'd rather face the Bucs in the divisional than I would the Packers currently. So they don't have many opportunities to do it. And while I do think their team has a ton of potential and they'll be in this spot again, there's no promises of that, especially for a team that's still proving themselves. And the franchise needs it more than anything. You saw how much a playoff victory meant in 30 years, meant for this franchise, and the fan base, and everybody behind it, and the ownership, and everybody behind the scenes wanting this so much for the Detroit Lions. And they need it a lot. But the reason why I'm leaving the Lions back a little bit is, again, because they have the team around it built. Their window is still open. While I don't think it's promised, the window's still going to be open for them to be able to climb out of it. They just have to bust through a couple teams to be able to climb out that window. They've shown that they have the caliber team to win this game or win the Super Bowl. They just have to build their defense more too. So even if they lose now, build up your defense a little bit more, and you're going to have that caliber team. Your offense has nothing to prove, and you have no immediate loss of players. You have nobody that you're worried about you're immediately going to lose. And of course your franchise would benefit a lot from this, but I would argue that a franchise that has never had success, has lower expectations, and is not expected to win the Super Bowl as much as a team that has been built up and has been propped up of a Super Bowl caliber team winning for multiple years, and a team that has lost 4 Super Bowls in a row, because the number 1 spot is the Buffalo Bills. And there's not many reasons. They're very, very short and to the point. And again, what came down to it for the Buffalo Bills to go over the Detroit Lions in this list for me was because if you're a team that didn't expect a whole lot from versus a team you expect a whole lot from, what is more important? Who has more to prove? And the fact that the Lions, a lot of people have already, shown how much this one playoff victory meant for them. Of course, it would mean a lot more if they kept on winning. And I'm not playing that off at all, because obviously the more they win, the better it looks. But the Buffalo Bills, for the last few years, have been battered down. They have always been the 3rd team in the AFC behind the Bengals and the Chiefs. Always. And now you can add the Ravens in that. Now you can add the Texans. And who's of the 3 teams, the Chiefs, the Bengals, and the Bills, are the team most likely to fall? Some people can say the Bengals because Joe Burrow's recent injury, not making the Super Bowl, or not making the playoffs, I should say, and not winning the Super Bowl when they had a chance. But the Buffalo Bills are not young. They have Josh Allen. Stephon Diggs is kind of youngish, but they don't have a whole lot of talent that's ready to go, young and ready, and Bucks, like Dalton Kincaid is another guy that comes to mind. I'm sure there's a couple defensive players I'm forgetting, but they have been in that spot in divisional and the conference. Actually, they weren't even in the conference, I don't believe. They're so close, but yet so far. Their franchise is 0-4 in the Super Bowl. Not only 0-4, they lost 4 Super Bowls in a row. And this is a little bit biased coming in me, because my family has a couple Buffalo Bills fans who experiences the downsides of being in this franchise, because you're so close but yet so far. And Josh Allen has been, obviously he's going to be in the conversation of a QB, but I've seen people start to write him off similar to Lamar, of is he actually going to be able to lead anybody to anything significant? And this franchise just needs it. It needs to be 1-5 in a Super Bowl. They need that, 1-4, 1 out of 5, if you want to say. They need it just purely because people expect it from them, and if they don't accomplish it, they're going to be looked at as a team that never made the mark. And their door's closing very fast. And I'd be if the Bills and Lions face off in the Super Bowl, I'd be so conflicted. I think in the end of the day, I would root for the Bills, but because the fact that the Lions make the Super Bowl is very, very great. It's just the Bills have much more to lose than the Lions do. And I think by having that elevates the Bills to gain even more than the Lions would. And that's kind of my 2 cents of that. If you want to disagree, I fully understand it. I just have the emotional connection to the Buffalo Bills of saying you've had so much, you've been so close, and then battered down to be so far. And it's really hard to be in that spot. So I'm going to give the Buffalo Bills the edge, and they are the team that will benefit the most from a Super Bowl victory this year. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll see you guys in the next one. StraightA out.